I'm sure everyone at some point in their lives has seen various protests about the Chinese cultural genocide of Tibet. It's a popular movement, or at least was a popular movement, Free Tibet, among the people who called themselves liberals. There's a debate within the United Nations that's been going on for decades now regarding Article 8 of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and whether or not the mass migration of Chinese into Tibet constitutes a cultural genocide. Now, whether or not the UN calls China mean names for what they're doing in Tibet, that certainly won't matter. Because being called a cultural genocider by the UN won't stop the Chinese government, and no country is going to war with China over what they're doing in Tibet. But it is noteworthy to point out that nobody ever comes out and says, huh, maybe the Tibetans are better off with all those Chinese. Ever think of that? They need to learn that the world isn't Tibetan. It's all sorts of people. And they need to get used to it, because that's the new reality of a globalized economy. If they want to compete in a globalized economy, they're not going to be this little insular Tibetan society. Besides, you Tibetans, you'll benefit. You'll benefit mightily from all of this increased diversity. Nobody ever says that about Tibet or ever says that to the Tibetans. But it is very common to speak this way of and to Europeans. And of course, there is a whole narrative that justifies this double standard. A paper in 2010 published in Strategic Insights, written by Kelly Greenhill of the Naval Postgraduate School, talked about the use of mass migration as a weapon to be used against one's enemies. The paper was entitled Weapons of Mass Migration, Forced Displacement as an Instrument of Coercion. It documents 64 instances of the use by states of the threat of mass immigration to try to get another state or non-state actor to do what they want. One colorful example from the paper involves Jimmy Carter's negotiation on human rights in China. The quote goes, quote, "Consider, for example, the suggestive reply of then Chinese Vice Premier Deng Xiaoping to U.S. President Jimmy Carter during the historic 1979 meeting. After Carter asserted that the United States would not trade freely with China until its record on human rights improved and China were allowed to emigrate freely, or the Chinese were allowed to emigrate freely from China, Deng smilingly retorted, 'Okay, well then, exactly how many Chinese would you like, Mr. President? 1 million? 10 million? 30 million? Whether Deng actually intended to influence U.S. behavior remains unclear, but in point of fact, his rejoinder reportedly stopped Carter cold and summarily ended their discussion of human rights in China. Close quote. Two more examples that Greenhill gives are the Haitians threatening to mass migrate to the United States and East Germany threatening to send a bunch of South Asians over to West Germany. So, quote, "In the summer of 1994, for instance, boats were being prepared in nearly every village along the southern coast of Haiti is an explicit attempt to put more pressure on the U.S. to hasten the return of Aristide. As one villager noted at the time, quote, "We cannot get arms to fight. The only way we can fight is to get the Americans to keep their promises. The only way to do that is to do what they fear most. Have us come to America." The next quote regarding East Germany. "Likewise, when East German officials quipped in the mid-1980s that their West German counterparts, quote, claim they have a liberal society over there, we will let them prove it. They fully anticipated that loosing South Asian asylum seekers on West Germany would cause widespread discontent and persuade the previously reluctant West German government to concede to their demands. And they were right." But wait a minute here. Aren't they in fact helping West Germany and hurting themselves by depriving themselves of the great diversity and giving the gift of diversity to West Germany? Wasn't Haiti benefiting the United States by bringing in Haitians into the United States? One of the items in the laundry list of crimes attributed to Nazi Germany was the mass migration of Germans subsidized via replacement level birth rates into parts of Poland and also France. A lot of people don't know this about that there was a colonization program in France. It also included forced relocation of gypsies, Jews, homosexuals, and communists into Poland. This, of course, was seen as a crime against those groups, forced relocating them. But it was also treated as a crime against the Poles. That is, having millions of people from foreign groups dumped into your lands was seen as a crime against the people already there. Yes, the forced relocation of them was seen as a crime, and we all know about that. We all know about the forced relocation into ghettos, and that's all been done to death. But also, it was seen as a crime against the Poles who were already there. That's something a lot of people don't know. But how ignorant these Poles were to think this way. The Poles should have seen this as restitution. I mean, who doesn't want millions of Jews, gypsies, and communists dumped into your cities? Now, granted, this was not as high on the list as, say, the mass killings due to the Commissar Order, or the anti-partisan sweeps in the Soviet Union, or the deaths in the camps, which later came to be referred to as the Holocaust, right? This is obviously quite a bit far down on the list in terms of the crimes attributed to the Nazi regime at Nuremberg, but it was seen as some sort of transgression against the Poles. Similarly, Stalin had mass migration programs of Russians into Ukraine and the Baltic states in an attempt to Russify them, the Russification program. And this policy was actually used in the United States in anti-Soviet propaganda as one of the many crimes of the Soviet Union. Now, granted, this program, the Russification program, was ranked well below the gulags, okay, but it was still seen as a crime. It was still seen as a very bad thing. When white settlers traveled across the Midwestern United States, they didn't set out to kill the Amerindians there. They didn't go out in groups and try to take over or make them slaves or whatever. At least not by then. Settlers were largely indifferent to the Amerindians. But as they traveled through, they would be attacked by the Native Americans who didn't want them in, quote-unquote, their land. It seems as if the Native Americans looked at the mass migration of Europeans into their land as an aggressive, belligerent act. And they speak of it their land and their people. And when they talk to Europeans, they'll talk about the invasion of the white man. What invasion? They're just moving in and setting up farms and cities. They're not, In India, the Aryan invasion theory was, contrary to popular opinion, originally a theory about migration. Okay? It wasn't about conquest. It was originally about migration, and some people later used it to mean conquest, but it was actually just mass movement of people. It was the migration of Central Asian peoples, similar to modern-day Iranians or Persians, called the Aryans, into modern-day Pakistan and then into northern India. But the archaeologists who advanced the theory used the term invasion because, after all, what is mass migration but a form of invasion? So they had a similar view of mass migration as an invasion to the Native Americans looking at the mass migration of Europeans as an invasion. Now, clearly, these archaeologists from the 1920s didn't realize that the Aryans were bringing in much needed diversity into India, a kind of genetic and cultural diversity that makes India a much better place to be today than, more homogenous backward countries like Norway or Denmark or Japan. And let me tell you, when someone comes up to you and tells you that diverse India is dirty, let me remind you that Japan and Denmark, they don't even have any designated shitting streets. Okay, in 2010, Gaddafi threatened to make Europe another Africa, quote-unquote, by stopping border enforcement and letting loose a bunch of blacks up through Libya, up into Italy, if he did not receive 5 billion euros. And the quote, he says, "Tomorrow, Europe might no longer be European, and even black, as there are millions who want to come in," he said. We don't know if Europe will remain an advanced and united continent or if it will be destroyed as happened with the barbarian invasions. Now, isn't it strange? Gaddafi seems to think that there is something inherent about black Africans that will make Europe a worse place, nay, destroy Europe. Hasn't he heard the good news of the wondrous benefits of diversity? And hasn't he heard that the backwardness and what Gaddafi thinks of as bad behavior of the black Africans is a result of European colonialism? I mean, apparently Gaddafi did not get that memo. Gaddafi also says, quote, "There are signs that Allah will grant victory to Islam in Europe without swords, without guns, without conquest. We don't need terrorists. We don't need homicide bombers. The 50+ million Muslims in Europe will turn it into a Muslim continent within a few decades." Well, wait a minute, Gaddafi, what's harmful about that? Doesn't Gaddafi understand that the large Muslim population in Europe will only make it stronger through Okay, that joke's getting old. In 2015 and 2016, the mayor of Calais and then economy minister Emmanuel Macron both threatened to stop blocking the migrants in Calais, which is right next to Britain, and threatened to let all these migrants that were being holed up in the Calais area into Britain. This is because Britain had a treaty that treats the English Channel and the Channel Tunnel as a specially regulated zone, not an area of free movement as the rest of the European Union is. Now, how strange is that for Macron that this would even be a threat? Odd that on one side of his mouth, Macron will speak glittering generalities about the benefits of immigration and diversity. But then when, the rubber hits the road, he lets slip by implication that these immigrants are actually a really bad thing. And finally, most recently, the European Union has threatened sanctions on the Visegrad group countries of Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary, if they didn't take in their quota of so-called refugees, right? In reality, economic migrants from Black Africa and all sorts of Arab countries. Now, of course, if these people are truly beneficial and truly advance and enhance a country, right, as Merkel has been claiming that these migrants will come in and help deal with labor shortages, Merkel's response to the Visegrad countries not taking in these African and Arab migrants, she should just say, well, suit yourself, more for us, right? That should be the response if these people are in fact benefiting the countries they go to. But she's not saying that. She's saying, in so many words, that you hillbilly bumpkins in Eastern Europe better take your share of the pain, or we're going to make you pay some other way. As it turned out, the threat of EU sanctions were hollow because they know that they had no way to enforce it. Okay, and nobody in Germany was going to support invading Poland to make them pay sanctions for not taking in Arab and African migrants. Okay, so even today, though, even with all the conditioning and all the social status signaling games that go on about the virtues of bringing in diversity, which is, non-European people coming into a formerly all-European space, it appears that even the most demented advocates of diversity still recognize at some level that this is a really bad thing. And it was known to be a bad thing throughout the whole of human existence. What then is happening that a sect of the European population has been conditioned to think, or at least pretend that they think that this is a really good thing? To become advocates of the third world overpowering the first and overpowering and dominating themselves.
It's because I get this question or comment a lot, of course, when I talk about this stuff. A lot of the Jews that I've talked to seem to be very pro-immigration, but not to Israel. Like, do you think that Israel should be taking a lot of Syrian refugees in?
It's probably not in their self-interest.
That's not what I asked.
Man, that's hard.
Not really.
Probably. I mean,
Yes or no?
probably not.
Why?
Huh?
Why?
Well,
Don't you all value diversity? Where's your multiculturalism preferences? I mean, why is it bad?
well, because they sort of want to kill the people that they would immigrate to.
Okay, so but wait a minute. Hang on, man.
Yeah.
Didn't you just give me a whole speech about not judging people collectively? And innocent until proven guilty, my friend? Oh, wait, is that only for Christians? Is that only for white people? When it comes to your country, things get a little different, right?
I mean, well, I'm not saying that they have a right to not let him in. I'm just saying it's probably not in their interest to do it.
Come on. You know you're squirming, right? I don't mean to be mean, but you understand this is a bit tough to hear from the outside, right? You people should accept all these Muslims. When it comes to Israel, oh man, they want to kill us. It is terrible.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so, I mean, then this is what drives, frankly, non-Jews a little crazy.